So we find in the Talmud different kinds of narrative, different kinds of discussions. The vast majority of the Talmud is comprised of what's called halacha. We know what the word halacha means. Halacha means, we think of it as observance, but it means really law, Jewish law. So as an example, you'll have the laws of a sukkah. How do you have a kosher sukkah? We have sukkahs coming up in a few weeks. So how tall can the sukkah be? How wide can it be? What materials are you going to use to build the walls? And what materials can you use in the schach? And what renders a lulav kosher or unkosher? What renders an etrog kosher or unkosher? Right? That is, if the majority of the Talmud deals with things like that. Right? And its approach is always to try to get very granular. It will deal with hypotheticals. It means it's trying to get the core idea of a law and all the associated laws. So it deals specifically with trying to reveal the law of the Torah in a way that you can answer any question you could potentially have. Thus, the dynamic nature of the Torah, wherein even if you invent new technology, so the Talmud doesn't say anything about electricity because it wasn't really harnessed at that time. But we have the principles, the immutable principles of the Torah in the Talmud, and therefore the application is the skill that's needed to apply the principle to the new scenario, which makes it a very interesting, challenge. Either way, there's an entirely different kind or narrative of the Talmud, which is called agadata or agadic, and that comes from the word like Haggadah, like telling over stories, like the Haggadah we say on Pesach. And that is entirely different. If you guys like study Talmud, and you just study like 25 pages of Talmud, of halacha, and then you get to one page of Haggadah, and you'll be like, this is a different book. This is entirely different. This was a different author, or different authors. Because it's suddenly you're in a different world. And the world is like, suddenly it's not everything's black and white. You're dealing with stories, you're dealing with parables, you're dealing with philosophy, you're dealing with ethics, you're dealing with theology, you're dealing with these things that seem very murky. And you see stories that seem to be supernatural or metaphysical.
You're not talking about Midrash?
Well, Midrash had a lot of Agadata. There's a very nice overlap between a lot of Midrash, not most Midrash, is more Agadata than Halachic.
What is
Midrash.
No, the
Agadic.
agadic.
Like agadata, it's not a word that
Okay, yeah, but I just wondered.
transfers well. So you've seen like a lot of weird science fiction that you would say, wait a minute, the Talmud asks, where does the sun go at night? Oh, well, why does it go to the west, not the east? Well, why doesn't it just stop and extinguish halfway through this? Like, these are not real questions, obviously, from an astronomy perspective. These are more like, well, what does the sun represent, and what does it mean? And this is obviously much, much harder to learn, because the intention of the authors is deliberately concealed. So while the halacha portion of the Talmud, every effort is extended to try to make it revealed by asking all the questions and analyzing and proving and sourcing and everything. When you turn the page, you're in Agadata, it's clearly intended to be concealed. Now the question is why? That's a very good question. And how exactly it's concealed. So what I want to do today here is give you guys an example of this kind of Talmud, which is a very, very intriguing piece of Talmud, and we'll read it and I'll be like, that doesn't make any sense. And we'll try to kind of build it and demonstrate kind of the wisdom that's all buried beneath the surface. So for example, you might have a Talmud that says something in a Gadic Talmud. It says something. And you read this like this doesn't tell me anything. And the truth is that this is only one part of the lesson. So the rabbis were really smart. They wanted the Agadata to be there, but hidden in plain sight, so to speak. So how would you hide things in plain sight? How would you if you want to send over a message to your friend in a war zone? You want to encrypt it. How do you encrypt Talmud? So either you code it, or what you do is you take it and split it into 4 different parts, and put one in every corner of the Talmud. And unless someone is a truly Talmud scholar and you collect all the puzzle pieces, you'll have no idea. Because you approach one piece of Talmud, and you have no idea that this is only part of a bigger picture.
Are you talking about 4
parts of the entire Talmud?
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
Oh yeah, so like if you and I were reading the Talmud, we get to a small piece of Agarata, we might have no clue what the lesson is actually being imparted, because we only got one slice of the pie. And you want to see the whole picture. It's like if you take a little puzzle piece out of a 5,000 piece puzzle, and you say, "What's the picture about?" You have no idea. Is it a boat? Is it scenery? Is it a building? Is it animals? You have no idea. How could you possibly know?
Well, Rabbi, why would they do that?
That's a very good question. One of the best questions of all time, I think. Why would they want to do that? So I think my answer that I've always given is that the Talmud, or the ethical and philosophical insights of the Torah, are not necessarily designed for everyone. Means the Torah wants to say things to Torah scholars. Means some things it wants to say to everyone, halacha, everyone got to know the law. But some things are, as you move up in your growth, you understand more. So just like everyone's heard the idea you don't teach Kabbalah in kindergarten. Why not? Because let them grow up and let them have a little bit more of a firm basis, and then when they're ready for it, then they'll get it and understand it. When we're ready for Agarata, we'll understand more and more. So it's designed deliberately designed that not everyone should be able to understand it at face value, or not at face value, or at first sight. Okay, so I always used to say that like the Talmud doesn't dispense wisdom like gumballs. Some of the deepest ideas and all of Jewish wisdom are included in the Agarata in the Talmud. It doesn't want to just throw it out, splurt it all out. It wants to make people who are deserved of understanding these kind of insights, they get it. Other people have no idea. Just go straight over their heads. And by the way, what happens when things go straight over your heads?
You don't want to.
What's the danger? Well, not only that, you do want to listen, but what happens when something goes straight over someone's head, but they don't realize that it went over their head? What happens then?
You misinterpret everything.
That's right. What happens then?
You might come to
You come to, not only you don't get it, but you say something entirely different than what's intended. Which, it's the irony. It's the fact that, someone did not get the message, did not get the lesson. They think they get the lesson, and then they pervert or corrupt the teaching because they really didn't understand it. And Maimonides, he has a whole essay on this, on how we're supposed to study Agarata. And he says that there's a lot of people that it's so bad they should never study Agarata. They shouldn't study. It's better off not to study because you'll study it and you don't get it, but you think you get it, and you think that the great sages of the Talmud are on your level. Therefore, whatever you understand, that's what they meant, and then you it's a total defilement of everything that's holy.
Well, how would people that aren't like you and your brother, and those people that go to yeshiva and learn, how would they know?
But they wouldn't. That's the point. That's the way it was designed. They're
So
not.
we wouldn't.
Now we're gonna give you guys a little taste of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to spell it.
Well, you don't even know how to spell it, and you know what? The Talmud doesn't label what's what. It doesn't have labels. There's a Agarata. Yeah.
it doesn't get
You may. Once you get a feeling for Talmud, if you actually do a lot of study of it, you'll be able to know where we're moving into Agarata. But my grandfather had, by the way, a method that he employs, just to give you kind of the scope of what we're talking about. A method of how to understand Agarata. Now, my grandfather was an incredible, incredible sage. Now, me and my brother, he puts us in his back pocket like nothing. Okay? Now, that's an understatement, a huge understatement. He would say that the way he approaches Agaritas is that you take the Agarata, whatever the statement may be, and then you kind of live with it. And you let the idea percolate within you for months and months. Imagine thinking about a small line of Talmud for months and months. It kind of germinates on its own and develops into something really dramatic and sensational and incredible over time. So if you kind of live with an idea, or at least an enigma even. You live with an enigma, and eventually the enigma becomes clear. So I'm going to give you guys a little example here. This is the one that I want to talk about today. And this is from the Talmud in Brachos. Brachos is the first book of the Talmud. It deals primarily with the laws of Brachos. Brachos means blessings. So blessings of the Hamotzi, and blessings of all the different six blessings for 6 different food categories. Then you have the after blessings, 3 different kinds of after blessings for natural natural occurrences like the lightning and thunder. Or what do you do? There's a special blessing when you see a Jewish teen or even a secular teen, a non-Jewish teen. There's a blessing that you say when you see a rainbow, right? These blessings, these are primarily with laws of blessing. And then it says as follows. It says, 3 things are a measure of the world to come. Now, what does it mean, a measure of the world to come? It means world to come is this idea that we've heard of, perhaps. What it exactly is, where it is, how we get there, what is exactly the qualities, the core qualities of this locale is a little bit of a mystery, I think, for most people. This is one of the sources that talk about it. And thus it's going to convey to us something about it. And when it says Olam Haba, it says Olam Haba is some other world. It's not this world. But when it says something is a measure of the world to come, what it means is that there are 3 themes that are a little bit like the world to come. In a small way, small measure, like 1% or 5% or 0.5%. Some similarity, some commonality between these themes in the world to come. Okay? And what are they? Number 1, Shabbos. Number 2, Shemesh, means the sun. And number 3, Tashmish. Now the word Tashmish, it's not clear what it means. So the Gemara has a question. What does Tashmish mean? Now, because Tashmish is an ambiguous word. Right? There's multiple meanings for the word Tashmish. And therefore, the Gemara says, well, there's 3 things that are a measure of the world to come. Shabbos, Shemesh, and Tashmish. Right? Shabbos, the sun, and Tashmish. Well, what does Tashmish mean? It has multiple meanings. Right? One of the meanings is sexual intercourse. That's one of the meanings of Tashmish. Another one of the meanings is going to the bathroom, removing one's bowels. Both of them have the same word. One's Tashmish Hamita, and one's Tashmish Nekavim. So the Gemara said only one word, Tashmish. Didn't tell you which Tashmish was. Tashmish Hamita, Tashmish Nekavim. So the Gemara says, which Tashmish are you referring to? If you say it means Tashmish Hamita, sexual intercourse, it makes someone weak, right? It weakens someone. Rather, it must mean going to the bathroom, relieving one's bowels. That's where the Gemara starts. That's where it ends. That's it. That's all we have of that. And when I first read this seems very bizarre. Like, we're talking about Olam Haba, this ultimate destiny of the Jewish people. All of Israel's a portion will to come. It's like the highlight of the ultimate conclusion, the apex of existence for a human is to reach Olam Haba. And there are 3 things that are like Olam Haba. Shabbos, okay, Shabbos, I guess, is a certain degree of pleasure. It's a certain bliss. It's a mitzvah. Whatever. I can hear the sun is really nice, really wonderful, really warm. And then it says Tashmish. It's like it throws you into this disarray. Well, what is it? The Gemara has a whole question. What's it referring to? Is it referring to this kind of Tashmish or that kind of Tashmish? It says, well, this kind it cannot mean because it makes someone weak. Well, what must be this kind? What is going on over here? What's the world to come? What about these things are similar to the world to come? What does it even mean that something is similar to the world to come? What does that even mean? And how are these things representative of any way the world to come? And lastly, this is, I think, 2 more questions. But like, going to the bathroom, really? That's this wonderful pleasure that's unmatched by anything. Olam Haba, this great destiny is like, how do we want to know what measure of it? It's going to the bathroom. Some people say, well, don't take that for granted. Of course, okay, but in the stream of life, that's not like the big, the big excitements that we have. It's nice, it's convenient, it's fantastic, it's wonderful. But
it's better than not going.
Oh yeah, I know.
Especially for men.
Yeah, especially for men.
So, and lastly, another great question that I think we have to ask on this Talmud. Talmud's saying 3 things are measurable to come. Right? That's what it says. And it says this, and that. Correct? 3 things. Shabbos, Shemesh, and Tashmish. Now, the Gemara obviously knew that the word Tashmish is not a complete item. Why? Because it's the beginning of, it's either Tashmish Hamita or Tashmish Nekavim.
It's like a half.
It's like a half a word.
Yeah.
So the Gemara is saying 3 things. And then it says 1, 2, and I'll tell you half of the other, the third. Just tell me, is it say Tashmish Hamita or Tashmish Nekavim? And I would know. And the Gemara says, Tashmish, which Tashmish do you refer to? Do you mean it's an intercourse? Well, then it makes someone weak. No, it must be going to the bathroom. Just say what it is. Simplify it. Say Tashmish going to the bathroom. That's it. That's what it should have said. No. Why does it have to kind of yank our chain, so to speak? I say, oh, Tashmish, I'm not going to tell you which one. Which one am I talking about? You don't know. Oh, you'll ask me? Okay, well, let's examine it. Is it this? Can't be this. It makes you weak. It must be that. Just tell me. 3 things the world will come. Shabbos, Shemesh, and Tashmish to cover, right? Shabbos, the sun, going to the bathroom. That's it. Close the Gemara. Where it says, Tashmish, what does Tashmish mean? Tashmish is only half a word. Wait, is it this? No, it can't be this. It must be that. It doesn't seem like a good way to what kind of lesson is that? So we have like 5 or 6 questions here. What do you guys say? Is this intriguing? If you would read this, you could read this. By the way, this Gemara is one of like 100 on the same page that are perhaps equally as perplexing. To just give you a scope of how much content there is here and how much room for scholarship there is here. Like this one line that we're going to spend at least another 40 minutes talking about. This one line it's like maybe 2 lines out of 70 lines, and every 2 lines is another thing that makes you like say, oh, the very same page, like sleep is 1/60th of death. What? What's death? What's sleep? Right? How are they? We relate. That's the same page. Same page. And it's obviously, the question that we have to ask is, okay, well, if this is what it, purports to be, it's something obviously very insightful. But this was included in the finalized text of the Talmud. This is an eternal lesson for all of the Jewish people forever. There's something very important here, and we read it, there's a lot of obvious questions. A lot of things that seem also bizarre, like, where'd this come from? Like, if you ask me, hey, what are the 3 things the world measure the world to come? I would say, I don't know, having nachas from your kids, going to Israel, and studying Torah. That would make sense, or something like that, And here it says, Shabbos, the sun, and Tashmish. Well, what's Tashmish? What is going on over here? It's good, this like, and this is the kind, and I'll tell you guys a little personally, for me, when I was studying this, I spent a few months really grappling with this particular line of Talmud. Because there were so many obvious questions, and I was working with the assumption that there's something incredibly, incredibly deep going on over here. Clearly it's concealed, it's hidden, it's buried under whatever, facade of this very enigmatic statement.
This comes from the writer, though, does it not?
Well,
it's not inspired by anything. This thing that you're talking about.
What do you mean?
It's written. The rabbis got together, right, and they had differing opinions on almost everything.
Well, not with Agarata. There's no different opinions in Agarata. Very importantly for him to mention. There's never any machlokas in Agarata.
Where did this come from?
This is what we call this idea. That's very good.
Yeah,
This is part of the oral Torah.
Okay.
There's an oral tradition. Now, it's possible that the rabbis' presentation, they were the geniuses behind the presentation, but the ideas are the ideas of Moses and God. Moses gave us the ideas from God. That's what the Jewish people have always believed.
So we believe that Moses. This is a Moses idea.
Oh, absolutely. This is called oral Torah, and this is straight from God. And we're telling us what Olam Haba is. And however, when the rabbis decided to write it down to actually put pen to paper, they wrote it down in a way that if most people read it, 99.9% of people read it, it'll just go straight over their head.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll say, Olam Haba, I know what it is. You go to the bathroom on Shabbat in the sun, you got it. And people say that, that's it.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate pleasure someone could possibly have, and that's the measure of the world to come. That's what you would think if you just read it like that. When you have the sensitivity, the sensibilities to understand what is actually going on over here and what is being conveyed, then you realize something a little bit more deeper is going on here.
The Talmud was finished when?
500 years after the Common Era, so 1,500 years ago.
1,500 years ago.
This the Babylonian.
Babylonian Talmud. So when we say Talmud, we generally mean the Babylonian Talmud. There is a Jerusalem Talmud, and
This is about 1,500 years.
Oh yeah, that's right. But the idea is an idea that they didn't make up on their own. And we'll see exactly how incredible this idea or collection of ideas is. So let's go through some background here. So what's the idea of Olam Haba? Just roughly, just whatever we found from the sources. Because we could talk about that. We could make a 7-part session in Olam Haba and really discuss it, in great detail. All the sources that we have. So, put simply, the way Maimonides puts it, it's a world of souls. It's a world where the soul is the center and the body is, if you have a body, it's a whole question: is there a body? Is there not a body? It's a little bit unclear, but it's the kind of the opposite, where it's the soul first and body second. And the Talmud says it in such a way. It says, in the world to come, there's no eating, no drinking, no washing, no anointing, no sexual intercourse. Rather, the righteous sit with crowns in their heads, enjoying the radiance of the divine presence, the Shekhinah. So what it says is that there's all the things that we equate with life over here: eating, drinking, washing, anointing, sexual intercourse. None of that in the world to come. So what is it? It's righteous people. So it's not everyone. In this world, we have everyone: righteous people, wicked people, moderate people, really bad people, really fantastic people. We have a mix. The world to come, it's just the righteous, and they have crowns in their heads. What does that mean? Good question.
In, not on.
It doesn't say on.
In.
It says in. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Most people say, because
Yeah.
in Hebrew you could kind of pass that along, but it does say in, and it's also very good question. Well, what does that mean?
How about
Good-
crowns?
good thing
I
picked
had
up.
Dennis put them there. Yeah, but there's crowns on some of the letters too. He's not talking about those.
I have no idea
He
what he's
might
talking
be.
about. I have no idea, to be honest with you. I have no idea what he's talking about. And I think that if we wanted to investigate this Gemara and spend a few months with this Gemara, we'd probably get some more insight.
You know what I mean by crowns in the letters?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
What crowns? We know that the idea of a crown comes up a lot in Jewish sources. There's the crowns they got at Mount Sinai, right? When they said Nasav and Ishmael, they got 2 crowns, and they sinned the golden calf. They lost those crowns, and then they'll get the crowns back. So crowns is something that is clearly linked to this other state of being, like people by Mount Sinai. Well, then they had prophecy. What does prophecy mean? How do you get prophecy? Well, you expose the soul. Well, maybe that's a measure of the world to come, because it's soul first, body second. Thus, there's the crowns, like something like that. Like that's piecing together a few pieces of Talmud by saying, hey, there's crowns in Olam Haba. There were crowns by Mount Sinai experience. Well, maybe when the Jewish people were at Mount Sinai, at the Mount Sinai experience, when they had the prophecy, and prophecy is a communication of God to human, but which part of the human gets communication from God? Anyone knows? Which part of the human gets communication from God? Is it body or soul?
With the soul.
A soul.
To the brain.
Well, how are the Jewish people able to have communication with God? Because they were soul first, body second. So maybe the Jewish people at Mount Sinai were in the level of Olam Haba, and therefore they had their crowns. And that, suddenly we're connecting some ideas here together, right? Well, either way, that's the first thing we know about Olam Haba. Place that there's no eating, no drinking, no standing, no sitting, no washing, no anointing, no intercourse. Just righteous sit with the crowns on their heads, enjoying the glory of God. Okay. Now, we have a very interesting sentence here from Maimonides. And he tells us that for us humans, thinking about Olam Haba, or trying to imagine us or humanity in the state of Olam Haba is impossible. And he says as follows, and I'll read it really quickly. You should know, by the way, Maimonides has an entire treatise on Olam Haba. So most of the sources that he brings over there. He has an entire introduction, very, very long, fantastically interesting introduction on Olam Haba, and the whole idea of reward and punishment, and where it comes from, and what should be the motivation for someone's behavior, what about altruism, what about Lishma, why are we doing what we're doing, what is this end goal, what does Mashiach mean, what does Chias HaMet, what does reviving the dead, what does Gan Eden mean, all these questions that kind of get mumble-jumbled together in our brains. Maimonides goes through one by one what it means and what it doesn't mean.
Well, you should do a bunch of classes on that then, too. That
Well,
sounds
there you go. So let's.
more classes.
He says as follows.
A lot of that is Kabbalistic.
No, it isn't.
Some of
I
it
think
is.
Maimonides.
Well, he wasn't, but the crown stuff is.
Well, the crown's a Gemara, so it's not. You don't have to. But what maybe the meaning behind it is what you have to do. Either way, he says as follows: just like a blind man cannot imagine color, and a deaf person cannot experience sounds, so too bodies cannot attain spiritual pleasures. That's what Maimonides writes. He says, you want to explain to a blind person what green looks like. You say, you can't do it. What words are you going to use? Right? How are you going to describe it? Say, oh, grass is green. You've never seen grass. Unless you have the experience of color, you have no way of defining it. Unless you've experienced spiritual pleasure, You have no way of defining it. There's no other point of reference. With Olam Haba, there's nothing that we can say physically that would equate to description of the spiritual. There's no overlap. Explain green. How can you explain green without calling upon a common point of reference? You can't. There's no overlap. You can't say, oh, it's a lot of X, because it's not a lot of X. It's something entirely different.
You just don't know.
So too, body and soul, physical and spiritual, this world and next world, entirely different. Now, we'll hold off on that thought here. Let's take that as a core inside what Olam Haba is. Olam Haba is this place of souls and souls' pleasures. And for us, we want to describe it to us. You're describing to a blind person what color is. So, when our Gemara tells us, this very cryptic Talmudic statement tells us that there's three things, even though we can't really understand Olam Haba. We can't. We're blind vis-a-vis Olam Haba. And we can't be explained. However, the Gemara says that there's three things that are in some way similar, that have some overlap to Olam Haba, that share a characteristic with Olam Haba. That's what the Gemara is saying.
But how do they know that these three things are similar to it if they have no way of imagining what it is?
Well, okay. So, okay, it's a good question.
It's a valid
So, I think the simplest answer is the fact that they have tradition. But I think the more complex answer is the fact that even though you cannot really understand what something is, you can understand that it exists. It means you could talk to a blind person and say, what's the difference between red and green? And they might be able to talk about it. It's still something they can't imagine, they can't conceptualize. They don't really know what it is. But they can say, hey, green's a little more luscious, red is a little fiery or a little bit louder.
Yeah, that's because somebody who can see has told them this.
Oh, yeah, that's my point.
Nobody can tell them what the world to come is like.
What
That's
about
true.
What
That's
about
true,
through
but the
prophecy? What about through
Well,
prophecy?
that's like what I said till now. This is not that the rabbis made up on their own. This is part of the corpus of the oral Torah that has been part of the Jewish collection of philosophy since the times of Moses.
So this was handed down to them from Moses, who got it from God. So that's, and God knows
Exactly,
what it's like.
exactly. And by the way, the verses don't ever mention Olam Haba explicitly. They mention it, they reference it, but they reference it in a side way. But the verses never mention Olam Haba, and the reason is because the Torah makes a lot of predictions. It makes a lot of projections. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't. However, it does not do things that cannot be falsified. Means the Torah says, "Hey, if you misbehave, you get kicked out of Israel." Well, that we see. We misbehave. We got kicked out of Israel.
Yeah.
Right. However, the Torah could have very easily said, "You know what? If you don't observe a Torah after you die, you get burned and you get tortured." It doesn't do that. Why doesn't it do that? Even if it may be true to some degree. Why does it mention Olam Haba? Oh, this great pleasures of Olam Haba. Because these are things that you could very much artificially use to try to inspire observance.
Dante didn't write the Torah.
Yeah. But the Torah doesn't want to do that. The Torah wants, by design, for people to have the option of not believing and not being forced to believe due to this terror of not accepting that's going to be outside of this realm of existence. Either way, let's start one by one. Let's start Shabbos. Let's find some commonalities between Shabbos and Olam Haba.
connection.
Huh?
Connection, your soul.
Yeah.
Connection to God. It's about connection to God, isn't it?
Okay.
I mean, people study on Shabbos, right? You learn.
Yeah, but Torah is also about connection to God. Prayer is also about connection to God. What's unique about Shabbos?
You don't think about things,
You don't-
everyday
you don't
things.
go
Different from
manual
your
labor.
Yeah,
everyday.
it's different. You don't think about everyday things. You don't work. You
It's more
don't
spiritual.
know.
Yeah, but a lot of things are spiritual. I came up with 4 different overlaps between Shabbos and Olam Haba.
Okay.
Well, first of all, let's start like this. Wait, how many days of the week are there? 7, right? And how many days are not Shabbos? 6 and 1. The Gemara says that the world is 6,000 years. And then it talks about the 7,000th, that's this other realm. thus, the idea, this is just as an introduction, this is like the simplest way to dig your toe into this, the idea of 6 days of this world, and then 1 day of the next world that parallels 6,000 years of this world to 1,000 years of the next world. Let's just hold that thought again. That's a thought out there. Let's just put that aside. Now let's go a little deeper. Olam Haba. How many mitzvahs could you do Olam Haba every day? Do you know?
How many mitzvahs?
Yeah.
You can't do any, can you?
0.
0, yeah.
How many mitzvahs can you do in this world?
As many as you can, yeah.
Right. How much reward do we get for mitzvahs in this world? None. And next world is all about reward. Thus, the relationship between the two worlds is that here is about working, preparing, acquiring, and the next world is about consuming, about enjoying it. The Gemara says, listen to this Gemara. The Gemara says, he who toils before Shabbos eats on Shabbos. However, he who does not toil before Shabbos, what's he going to eat in Shabbos? We know that the laws of Shabbat say that you can't cook on Shabbos. So the before Shabbos is all about preparing for Shabbos. And then once the clock strikes Shabbos, what happens? You switch from preparing mode to consuming mode. Olam Hazeh, this world, is all about preparation. Preparation for what? For Olam Haba. And now Olam Haba is the idea of consumption. The Gemara, the verse, the Mishnah says that this world compared to the next world is like a corridor before a hall. Like when you walk through like a banquet hall. You walk, you're preparing towards something, right? You're approaching something. And that's the connection between this world and the next world, says the Gemara. And thus, what's Friday? It's preparing for Shabbat. It's approaching Shabbat. Right? What's Shabbat? Well, it's enjoying, consuming that you prepared on Friday. Mm-hmm. Thus, if you want to know a little bit of the feeling of what it's like to transition from mode of work to mode of consumption, you look at Shabbat. And Shabbat is a little bit of a microcosm of Olam Haba. Just like we have this rhythm that that we're working the whole week, and then Friday you hit this fever pitch. And the fever pitch, you got to prepare the challah, you got to prepare the wine, you got to light the candles, you got to everything done. Shabbos, stop. Now you're enjoying. Now you're consuming. That is a little bit, a small measure of what Olam Haba is. This life, we're here running, we're working with the kids, we're trying to do as many mitzvahs as we can, trying to study as much Torah as we can, trying to accomplish as much kindness as we can, and then we that's it. We're no longer in this world. Boom, we get in the next world. Now we are what we have prepared. Now it's time to consume that we prepared. Now, to me, like, okay, whoa, this is already an insight. This is something dramatic, and especially the fact that the Talmud elsewhere makes this connection between Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba, versus before Shabbat and after Shabbat. That's one thought. Let's talk about another thought here. What do Maimonides tell us about Olam Haba? Right? How do we understand? How are we going to relate it? We really can't, right? Unless you've experienced it. You can't really understand it. It's just weird thing. There's no words to describe unless you've been there.
And you can't be there.
And you can't be there. Perhaps when we talk about Shabbos, describe Shabbos. Okay, it's 26 hours, 25 hours, you don't do any creative work. Doesn't sound so inspiring. Really? That's what it's all about? And you can't really talk to someone about Shabbos unless they've actually experienced it. Unless they've experienced it, there's no point of reference. And in fact, the Gemara even says, and there's another Gemara that I found that says, the Gemara says that there's this great story about the Caesar came to one of the rabbis and said, how come the Shabbat food always smells so delicious? He says, well, we have a special spice called Shabbos. He's like, okay, I want you to tell me the spice. He says, I can't. Unless you observe Shabbos, unless you have Shabbos. Right? Then you have the spice. Otherwise, you don't have the spice. So I was thinking that maybe this is another overlap. That Shabbos as well is this idea of a mitzvah that works the opposite way. Typically we understand things and then we do it. We have the approach of, we're a very cerebral religion, and therefore we don't just do things that are outrageous. Right? We understand it makes sense, and we do it. And before we do it, we understand it. Yet Shabbos, if I would tell you, like, this is what it's, if I just define Shabbos for you, and you've actually never experienced the Shabbos meal, you've never experienced, the Shabbos atmosphere, well then, to you, it sounds insane. Like, what is this? But it's a certain spiritual quality to it, and therefore it's not definable. The pleasure of Shabbos is spiritual. And therefore, unless you've experienced it, there's no point of reference. Olam Haba, same thing. There's some overlap, there's some commonality between Shabbos and Olam Haba. Like this, a third reason. It's a very interesting idea here. So he said, in this world, we're body first, soul second. Next world, we're soul first, and there's even a question if we even have a body. Maybe we have a body, we just don't need to tend to it, or we don't have a body at all. We don't stand, we don't sit, etc. What is the downside of being body first and soul second? What's the downside from a spiritual perspective? From a Torah perspective?
The downside of having body first? Well, you have the Yetzer Hara that you're always having to battle with. So you're always having a battle, right? I mean, there's always challenges and battles because of the Yetzer Hara. That would be one thing, right? Okay,
but let's extend this to, let's say, a mitzvah, right? So we have a lot of mitzvahs. Now, the vast majority of mitzvahs are really hard for us to do. Why are mitzvahs hard to do? Our soul wants nothing more than to do as many mitzvahs as he possibly can. The problem is that our body is first. And our body is first in what we feel. And therefore, pray 3 times a day. What a schlep, right? Don't forget to put your tefillin on every day, right? Don't give 10% charity. All these things, and our body's protesting, and it's fighting, and it doesn't resonate within us. And we feel a little bit out of character. I don't know if you guys have ever been in this position, but on the holiday of Sukkot, right? So we have this mitzvah. It says you take a branch, and you take a bunch of other branches, and you take a lemon, and you shake it. And I was once stopping, like, in the middle of a shul, and I'm looking at all these people. I'm like, I wonder what their coworkers would think if they saw them right now.
What their what?
Coworkers. Like, and is it okay to feel strange doing a mitzvah? And why do we feel strange doing a mitzvah? Do you know why? Because our feelings are linked to our body. Our feelings are linked to the physical, and therefore something that's entirely spiritual, like shaking the lulav and esrog. Our soul loves it. It's life-giving activities for our soul. But for our body, it's weird, it's bizarre, it's strange, it's... What is this? How does this in any way improve our life or anyone else's life?
What does it mean? Yeah.
That's what the body says. And this tension is the reason why our life has purpose. But it's also the reason why mitzvahs are so distant from us. Imagine if you felt hungry if you didn't study Torah. Like right now, if you don't want to eat food for 5 hours, 6 hours, you start grumbling. Why? Because your feelings are linked to your body. Well, if your feelings were linked to your soul, then going 5 hours without Torah study would also make you hungry. And then you would die after 2 days of not studying Torah. Because the Torah is compared to water, Torah is compared to food. Our problem in this world is that the mitzvahs are spiritual, and we are primarily physical, and therefore those two are constant clashing. What happens in Olam Haba? Olam Haba, it's the opposite. Our body doesn't matter. We don't need to eat. We don't need to drink. We don't need to sleep. There's no sexual intercourse. Nothing. Our body is not a player at all. And what's there? Just enjoying the pleasure of God. Just spiritual. It's the exact opposite. Tables have turned. And then spiritual activities in Olam Haba are entirely natural. And there, the equivalent of shaking the lulav, of course that makes sense. And you're totally in harmony and totally at peace with such an activity.
But you can't do an activity if you don't have the body.
Well, no. First of all, it's not so clear you don't have a body. You may have a body, or you may be able to do a soulful activity, which is the soul. Okay. Either way, if you want to know a little bit about what it's like in Olam Haba, right? You want to find a mitzvah that you feel totally at peace with. A mitzvah that you don't feel like there's a clash between you and the mitzvah. Shabbos. Shabbos, you look at the Shabbos meal, and you see mountains of great food. You see the delicious challah, sumptuous challah, and you're drinking alcohol. You have delicious food, the singing, and you're like, your body is totally on board, totally, and you want to just dig in. And whoa, dude, it's a mitzvah. Why are you suddenly digging into a mitzvah? Why is your body suddenly on board? Because Shabbos is immeasurable to come. Shabbos is, if you want to get a little bit of a feeling, what's it like for your soul when you do a mitzvah, right? It's a little bit, in a small way, similar to what your body does with Shabbos. Your body, you come into Shabbos, you're ravenously hungry. There's a special mitzvah to not eat food from Friday afternoon, from Friday midday. So it's been 6 hours since you ate, you're starving. The food smells to high heavens, fantastic. And you come in, everyone's dressed all nice, and the table looks great, and there's flowers, and everything's beautiful, and you're seeing the Shalom Aleichem, and you dig in, right? You're totally on board. Your body's on board, your soul's on board. There's no friction at all with the mitzvah. That is a little bit of a measurable to come. A little bit of the feeling of what's it like to be in Olam Haba, of what's it like to not have any resistance to doing spiritual activities. Thus, when it says Shabbos is immeasurable to come, we have at least 4 reasons. There may be more reasons, but maybe 4 overlapped. But now we see from various aspects of what Shabbos, we see what we see what the lesson is. It makes a lot of sense. This is an incredibly deep insight, and it's nuanced, and there's subtleties, and there's in so many different areas. We learn about Shabbos, we learn about Olam Haba, we learn about ourselves, we learn about the makeup of the body-soul relationship. Like, this is now a very valuable and insightful and wonderful Talmudic teaching. What about the sun?
No, light and warm.
So you light and warm. So I think that a good, an easy way to dip our toe into this, a simple way to understand is that, listen, this world is a world of obscurity, a world of darkness, so to speak. Why? Because what's really important, our soul, is ignored, it's just bizarre. People are acting in such a silly way. Because they hear about their body. The body will be interned in the ground in 50 years, being eaten by maggots. Like, why are you investing so much time in the body? It seems insane, right? It's as if people are blind. And the soul is it turns around, in 100 million years, your soul will be around. Right? You're going to invest in the body? It seems backwards. So it seems obscure. Olam Haba is, well, there's clarity. Just like the sun brings clarity, so to Olam Haba is clarity. The thought of Olam Haba, the idea of our soul continually existing forever, for eternity, that brings clarity. That's a very simple way to approach it. But we're going to go a little deeper here. What's unique about the sun? It's something that's very unique that only the sun has, a characteristic that only the sun has. Well, I'm saying it's the center of our solar system.
It's ever constant.
It's constant.
And
It's
the light and the
right.
It's constant.
It's light. It's wonderful light. Right. Mm-hmm. What for us? What about the sun is different than anything else that we encounter from our perspective in the world? So to me, remember, this is where we started from. We're doing this experience that took me 5 months to do. So, what
so
I
you
noticed.
understand why we're sitting here.
Oh
going,
yeah. So we find like this: the sun, even though it's there, we cannot look at it.
Not for too long.
That's
You
right.
can't.
Yep.
Why not?
Burn your
Go
eyes.
blind.
Too bright. Yeah.
It's more than that. It is coming with too much force than what you can handle. And then we find like this. Then I find a Talmud. Talmud seems to say this. Remember, this is Talmud. These Talmuds are scattered throughout the Talmud. So if you didn't know these pieces, you didn't have these pieces of Talmud, these other pieces of the puzzle, you wouldn't have no idea what this means. Talmud says as follows: prophets only prophesied for the days of the Messiah, but with regards to the world to come, an eye does not see it, Only God sees it. Now, what this means is as follows. We look about all the prophets and talk about all the wonderful things that happen to the Jewish people. All those things are only for the days of the Messiah. The world to come, their eye couldn't see it. Even the eyes of the prophet, the great visionaries, right? The people of the great foresight, they couldn't encapsulate it. I was thinking, like Maimonides even told us. He says that even though it's there, you can't see it. You want to know what it's like to do Olam Haba? Well, you can't. Just like you can't look at the sun. Right? There's no overlap between these two realities. A dramatic idea, right? That's one of the basic ideas of Olam Haba. And in some ways, if we want to know a little bit about what it's like to have a reality that's there, that is something that we cannot really understand. Well, the sun's there, right? You know the sun's there. Anyone doubts the sun's there? No, it's there, right? But you don't ever look at it. Why don't you ever look at it? Well, because you can't. But even though it's there. Olam Haba. Well, we're blind. We can't see it, but it's still there. That's one
but
thought.
We can glimpse at the sun.
Huh?
You can glimpse at the sun.
Okay,
It looks
yeah,
like you
okay.
can't see.
Okay.
That's why these are just small things and what it's like.
It's a measure of the world to come, exactly.
Yeah.
In a small way, it's similar to very good, Wendy. Additionally, here, we're told in the Talmud, another Talmud. Remember, Talmud are scattered everywhere. Like we're putting all the pieces of the puzzle together here. We're told that the light of the sun will get diminished in the future in Olam Haba. The sun will be less bright. Why? Why would the sun be less bright? Because the sun, the light that will shine forth from the righteous will render it insignificant. It means that when you look in Olam Haba, you see the righteous will be brighter than the sun. Let's think about it somewhere else. Now, what does that teach us? Go ahead.
Is everybody that has ever lived and died and is righteous, are they still there in the world to come?
When Olam Haba is one of the great questions. It's a very good question.
Is Moses' soul up there?
Yeah, so most probably not, but there's a lot of different opinions about this.
Okay.
There's-
I don't want to.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question.
Because Rabbi Goldman
There
said
are
one time that Olam Haba doesn't exist yet.
right, but
It's
there
not-
are opinions that say it does already.
It does, okay. Yeah.
It's not so clear. There are opinions that say yes.
It'd be millions and millions and millions of souls up there.
What's the problem?
No, well, there's no problem, but that would be
It's not
emanating.
limited by space. So.
That would be illuminating the light, like you're saying, and that would probably be the correlation to the sun.
Well, what about also if you were in a Olam Haba there, you were in the presence of Hashem, whose light would be, the Shekinah would be brighter than the sun anyway, wouldn't it? I mean,
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but I don't know about how. We're talking about just the righteous for right now. The righteous are compared to the sun. That's what the Gemara says, right? That's all the Gemara says. Now, we found some really cool things here. Who else do we know that looked like the sun? Is there anyone that we know looked like the sun?
Who else
he
do we
looked
know?
like the sun?
Who or what heavenly body or
Who?
Who looks like the sun?
There's a Gemara that says that there's someone whose face was as bright as the sun.
Oh, Moses, when he came down
Moshe.
from Sinai. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
and for the rest of his life.
Okay, yeah.
Moshe's face, the Gemara says his face was as bright as the sun.
Wow.
And also we're told that Moshe, like you said, wore a mask because people couldn't look at him. Perhaps we could say that Moshe, even though he was in this physical world, but him himself, the relationship that his body had with his soul was one of the body being in total submission to the soul. Thus, Moshe was living here on planet Earth in like Olam Haba, like the world to come, and therefore he was like one of the tzaddikim. His face shone like the sun. Now, what else do we know about Moshe that's supernatural?
What, is that a question?
What else do we know about Moshe that's supernatural?
Well, he did those plagues. He was able to administrate the plagues.
Well,
Okay,
he
but a
was
lot
the
of
one
people
that
did.
He was the greatest prophet, so he was able to communicate directly with Hashem.
What does that mean? That means that there's no body
no-
intervening,
Right.
Yeah.
which is
He's
incredible.
It's like spiritual. It's,
Now,
So
okay,
was Abraham, right? Was it
No,
not at that
no,
level?
no one's prophecy. No one's prophecy rivaled that of Moses.
Yeah, remember-
We find that Moses went up to the heavens for 4 days and 40 nights. What does he mention when Moses mentions this? He says something about himself. Anyone remembers that? We read this a few weeks ago in the Parsha. Right, that's my notes here. Anyone remembers?
You read the portion.
Well, he didn't eat or drink or anything, correct? I mean, he was like, which is
He
kind
didn't
of-
eat or drink.
Well, that's kind of unusual.
He
for a
didn't eat
person
or
to do
drink.
that
How is
and
Moshe
die.
not able to eat and drink?
And not die.
Who else do we know that doesn't need to eat or drink? In Olam Haba, there's no eating, there's no drinking.
Oh, okay.
Moshe here was like Olam Haba, so he didn't need to eat or drink.
For how long?
40 days.
40 days.
I mean, what human could do that? You can't.
No, not survive.
I don't think. Without water, at least, you couldn't. You,
No. You can't, okay.
To me, that was,
No.
whoa. Moshe was living in a state of Olam Haba, even though he was in this world. And I guess I found some incredible things. I found, let's say, Moses' body and soul, right? Normally, as there's some more sources here, I don't want to get to the end here without going too far over time. Normally, the body and soul hate each other. They're opposites. There's a Talmud, the Midrash says that every second the soul wants to leave the body. God has to force it to stay. And then, when Moshe is about to die, there's a great Midrash that says that his soul doesn't want to leave. And the soul says, there's no better place for me in the world than to be in the body of Moshe. Moshe's body was in no way oppressive to the soul, or in any way. It caused absolutely no friction with the soul. Remarkable. Thus, when we say that Olam Haba is comparable to the sun, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of different reasons, either because it's incomprehensible to us, or the idea of a soul is this exposure or revealing of the soul, and once you take that away, it's something that's just as dramatic as the tzaddikim. That's what they are. Now, what about the last thing? So, last thing is tashmish, waste removal. Why does it say it ambiguously? Remember the question we asked at the beginning? Let it say tashmish nekavan, going to the bathroom.
which one?
Yeah, don't say tashmish. Oh, I'm not telling you which one it is. You want to know which one it is? Okay, well, is it this one? Can't be this one. Can't be intercourse, because then it makes someone wait. It must be going to the bathroom. It must be, for the fact that the Gemara did not just say what it is, it must be that this is part of the lesson. The whole question of which one is it this one or that one, that's part of the lesson. What does that mean? What it means is like this. It's not telling you that the pleasure of either one of these two is in any way similar to Olam Haba. However, what it is telling you is that there are certain characteristics of physical pleasure that are entirely different than material than spiritual pleasure. For example, here the Rambam tells us earlier that all physical pleasures don't last forever. Right? They're causative. So, for example, you have the ice cream. You feel the pleasure when the ice cream's there. Ice cream's gone, pleasure's gone. That's the marker of physical pleasure. Spiritual pleasures last forever. Gemara says, tashmish. Which tashmish? Right, is it intercourse? Right? No, that makes you weak. What's it telling you? It's telling you that intercourse is a physical pleasure, because afterwards, not only doesn't last forever, but you get weak. It has this bad aftertaste, so to speak. It has this letdown that comes afterwards. And therefore, it is descriptive of, or it's emblematic of a physical pleasure. However, is there any sort of pleasure we can have in this world that even after the activity is done, we still feel good? Is there anything that's like that? That it's in some small way comparable to spiritual pleasures? As the Gemara, we found one. There's one pleasure that has a little bit of a degree of lasting quality to it. That's going to the bathroom.
Oh, what does that mean?
Well, you feel bad before you go, and you feel better after, and that lasts.
No, but
until, yeah.
So you
that's-
have to
it's-
go
unless
again.
you got
You
the
have to
old
go
man
again.
disease, you have to wake up every 3 hours and go to the bathroom.
He's talking about the other,
Well, it doesn't.
that doesn't make sense to me.
Would you? Do you believe what you just
Just
I
said?
don't think you
really
guys
lost
understood. If it doesn't make sense, it makes a lot of sense. Let's work through it again.
Okay,
All right.
Okay.
I'm not the only one, right? Everybody else is.
No, I don't
kinda
understand.
I don't understand it.
You
I
do?
don't-
I mean, yeah, because you do.
But that will relate to the world to come.
But
Well,
how
it's-
Well,
lasting
the
really is
idea
that?
of a pleasure lasting after,
After the activity that brings about the pleasure is done.
Okay.
So I'll say it again, if this makes sense. I believe it does. And that is like this. What it's talking about is not the degree of pleasure. I think there's a good argument to be made that if you compare the two tashmishes, perhaps there's an argument to be made that sexual intercourse is a greater pleasure. I think that's a good argument to be made. That's not what it's talking about. The Mishnah already declares that if you take 1 second of pleasure in Olam Haba, and you take all the pleasures of this world, take 1,000 years of combined human pleasure in this world, and put it all together, it won't equal to 1 second of pleasure in Olam Haba. It's not the degree or magnitude of the pleasure that we're talking about. It's the nature or the quality or the mode of pleasure that we're talking about here as well. And that is like this. Physical pleasure is entirely different than spiritual pleasure. Physical pleasure, right, is causative. There's the cause and there's the pleasure. Spiritual pleasure is status, right? The state of who you are. Right? If you're having the pleasure of God, if you're experiencing the pleasure of God, right, that status is what gives you the pleasure. Thus, you don't lose it. Thus, the activity that brings about the pleasure in this world, the activity is there, the pleasure is there, the activity is gone, the pleasure is gone. In the next world, it's not about an activity that brings about the pleasure, it's about a state of being. State of being, and therefore the pleasure continues forever. Now, the Gemara is saying here that there's one pleasure that we found that lasts even a little bit after the activity that brought upon the pleasure. And that's going to the bathroom, removing one's bowels. Wherein, when someone has to go to the bathroom, and then they go, and they come out of the bathroom, they feel great. Well, how are you feeling great? It's a physical pleasure. Well, wait a minute. Don't we know the rule of physical pleasures, that when the pleasure is there, then it's there. When it's gone, it's gone. When the activity of the pleasure is there, then it's there. When it's gone, it's gone. What's the deal? There's one pleasure that bucks the trend. There's one pleasure that has some sort of shelf life past the activity that brought about the pleasure, remove one's bowels. And the Gemara even showed it to us by saying, Tashmish, well, which Tashmish? Is it this Tashmish? Well, no, it weakens you. I.e., it's illustrative of the physical pleasures that, when they're there, great, and otherwise, afterwards, you're on your own. What's the one pleasure that in some small, minute way is comparable to spiritual pleasures? Removing one's bowels. Make sense this time?
I guess.
Just a quick addendum here. I skipped a lot of things because I don't want to go over time, but there's a great line here, once again from Maimonides, where he kind of mentions that it's possible to achieve this spiritual pleasure in this world. Like we said, Moshe was able to do it. Right? There is a path to doing it.
Is that what you call the vaquus?
That would help, yes. What I would call dvekus, I think there's others. Dvekus is a word that is not in English. I would say it's possible to achieve it. How you achieve it is a very interesting, there's an entire class in that. How you actually go about doing it. But either way, once you do it, everything else seems childish. All other pleasures pale in comparison to this pleasure. Maimonides gives an example, says you have a powerful king. You have a powerful king. And he has the pleasures of dominion, of power, of decision-making ability. And someone says, hey, they're playing a game of punch bowl in the backyard. All the kids are. You want to go join? There's like a middle deal with the most complex, sophisticated pleasures in the world. You want me to go play with the kids on the floor with a ball? He says, yes, at that time when you were unsophisticated, right, then playing with the kids with the ball, that's the pleasure that you want. Once you have experienced higher level of pleasures, well, that doesn't excite you anymore. And there is a way that we can actually in this world achieve those pleasures, but by doing that, we will also become greater connoisseurs of pleasure. And therefore, other pleasures would, seem to be less significant, watching a ball game, that's a nice pleasure. It's a physical pleasure, If you've experienced spiritual pleasures, that's not what I'm saying anymore. You've upgraded your class of experiences, and now you want more. You're not satisfied with the small childish pleasures that of your youth. Either way, I think that there's a lot of incredible lessons that we got just from this class on its own. If hopefully one of the lessons is that when the Talmud was written, and especially things like the Agartha of the Talmud that seem to be very obscure, very dramatic, very bizarre, what it really is a puzzle piece, and it's oftentimes puzzling by design because that's the intention. The intention was to have this portions of Torah delivered in a way that you really have to work hard to understand it. But besides for that, if that's what we took away, great. If otherwise, maybe we even took away some nice insights about Olam Haba and what the role of us in this world is to try to attain, and how it is a reflection of our body's soul, and understand a little bit about what we need to do to achieve those very lofty and desiresome goals in our lives. Okay, guys? This was wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you.